See.
Hello, we are back for part two. We had a brief intermission and got in new costumes, some of us, and here we are. We're going to talk with Samuel Tressler right now about his movie Leda, which is a 3D movie. Um, so you would need special equipment to see it in that way, but you can also see it in a 2D presentation. Giles has seen the movie and reviewed it. He'll do most of the questioning, but I thought maybe I would start out with just a question about the mythological inspiration, because the story comes from a old Greek myth that I read in Ovid, Metamorphoses, and also William Butler Yeats had a poem about Leda and the Swan, which when in college, I did my thesis on Yeats, so I was familiar with that. It's a story about Zeus, as he was prone to do in the old days, would take the form of animals and seduce and impregnate human women. And so we have a sort of a modern take on that. Is what attracted you to this as the impetus for your first feature?
So I had been trying to come up with one of the hardest things in making stuff for me is kind of coming up with that spark of an idea that I can commit to or be inspired by. And my co-writer, Wes Pasterfield, had done a painting on Leda and the Swan and kind of proposed the idea. And initially it was the fact that we could kind of explore a lot of themes between pregnancy, between divine intervention, between a relationship with God, like similar to like what Mary had, but to explore it in different ways. Like how does the human relate to that experience? And also, subtle hints at sexual trauma as well as childhood trauma, just to try to build this character of Leda beyond the myth. And then learning more about the myth and how it is such a part of classical art, such an iconic image in classical art with, so many thousands of renditions of Zeus at the pond with Leda in the form of a swan. I thought it would be pretty cool to do it on the screen. I also really want to, or have strive to develop like a language in cinema that is artistically, has artistic merit. And so to use a subject of classical art and bring it to the screen, it just seemed like it made complete sense.
Okay, that's what I had hoped to hear. Giles, will you take over now the questioning?
I will do my best. So that's obviously the background of the story, the impetus as to why you pursued it. Hopefully, this segue will get us somewhere. The overarching style of your film, Leda, what struck me most among a number of things was, shall we say, the photographic nature. There's a keen awareness on your part of where you're putting your lens and how things are arranged in front of it, to such an extent that I theorized in an aside in my review that you had a background in photography. And I was wondering if perhaps, if you do, and even if not, maybe describe your background either in, film, photography, or art in general as to how it helped you shape the look that you achieve with this debut.
Yeah, I do not have a background in still photography. Um,
Oh,
We're losing Samuel.
I think so. Let's see.
was more
If you can hear me, Samuel, we're not getting your audio.
Very interested in film and kind of move. Bear with me.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going on a tour of the apartment or the house.
Trying to make sure that the housemate is not streaming something. Sorry, I'm in France right now renting this shitty little apartment that some guy promised me I had high-speed internet, and we're not sure if we do. I guess
High-speed
it's not-
internet in France probably means something different than it does in the US. So
I'm learning that, yes. If I can't even stream,
Well, we've been hearing you fine, and now we see motion that looks pretty synchronized. So, last I heard you say was about your lack of background in still photography.
right. So I don't come with a background in still photography. I obviously I did some in my early years, but I would say that the influences come more from my interest in film theory and film history, and kind of the mixture. I mean, I feel like the most valuable things in cinema, from my perspective, are the subjective camera, where the camera is being put, the perspective that the audience has on the scene. That mixed with the mise en scène, like what is in the screen, like you said, and then all together with the montage, what shots you put next to each other, which is obviously just like classical cinema training. But I sometimes, even with the film, I feel like sometimes I'm a little too obsessive with those, and so things get very underlined in those visual styles.
I'd say there may be truth to what you've just said there, but I will pair that with my remark that that was not at all problematic for me. Anyone seeking, shall we say, a more traditional film experience may not be pursuing this title in the first place, but the fact that you have made a movie which occasionally brought attention to the fact that we were watching a movie, I don't think is a shortcoming.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's almost kind of the self-reflexive. Sometimes I have to find what I think is wrong or where I want to go, or start to judge myself. But I've been super impressed, because to make a feature film that's silent, and the film that it is in this day and age, and try to release it on a massive scale and see the reviews, I thought it was going to have a lot more people just immediately shooing it off. But even the people that are like, oh, this movie wasn't for me, I'm not too into the more art side of films, it's still beautiful and it's still worth watching. And that's been super interesting to hear.
Oh, good. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned silent, because that isn't quite accurate. It's a dialogue-free film, but it does have generally like ambient sounds will crop up in the soundscape, as well as the musical score. So that leads to my next obvious question. Why did you and your co-writer decide to keep this free of the spoken word?
So in all the shorts I had made and that's not completely true. I had made some shorts with some talking, but it was really almost an obstacle of can I do this, and how will it cause the story or the style of cinema making to change if I force myself not to have dialogue. You could argue also that it's that I'm not so comfortable with dialogue, or that I don't really like dialogue so much. But it was just, for me, it was an experiment in kind of pure filmmaking. Like, how can I make a captivating modern story? And also, like you said, it's not a silent film per se, but a dialogue-free one, because there's no reason to make a completely silent film. And I didn't want there to be any inner titles or anything that like pull you out of the actual story. So to try to still have it be relatable and have it be emotive, but not have to explain it through dialogue, it was a complete challenge, and it really changed the whole process of the film. I rewrote the script probably 7 times. throughout production and post-production, just because there were so many things that weren't working. We would get into rehearsals and have two people trying to play a scene that was on the paper, and it just felt so pantomime-y, or, it's so easy for an actor to try to make up for the lack of being able to talk, that they would just over emote. And so to find that balance and to find it the natural feeling of the whole thing, I really wanted the lack of dialogue to pull you into the film rather than distance you from it. And I think we found a good balance.
Yeah, I'd say so. And that makes me wonder, where did you find the cast, or what was the going about the casting for this? Because as you've hinted at, the performances require fairly constant travel along a very narrow tightrope between failing to communicate anything and communicating excessively.
Right. So we primarily, because we shot the film, entirely in Maryland, and there's not really a big pool of film well, I mean, everyone that worked on the film, as far as the crew, was primarily Maryland based, and they were extremely talented and awesome. But as far as casting and stuff, we didn't want to be limited to just our local community. So we did a lot of online casting, cast a wide net, had hundreds of people send us in demos or whatnot for the lead. And Adeline, who ended up playing the role, Adeline Therry, she was actually our first Zoom interview. And then we did callbacks in person. And she had a background in Lecoq theater movement training. And so that, she's also French native. So she had to do a lot of stuff without talking already. And between her sensibilities and interest in film that connected kind of with ours, and then her ability to play more movement based, she kind of brought a lot to the process of what would work and what didn't work. So I kind of leaned on her a lot for self-directing as well. And then, we would also just try to direct the story through camera placement and editing as well.
Because she's in, well, not every shot, but virtually every shot. So she's definitely the anchor and the primary presence cast wise there. So that was sounds like a good find for you. I'm glad
it really was. Ended up becoming a creative partner to this day. So it's she was super good. It was tough, but and we also, being completely independently funded, the production, the whole process was about 10 years. And the production, actual principal production, spanned 11 months, because we would shoot for about a week. Then we would raise funds. I would just work jobs, and my co-producer Clark would work jobs, and then we'd shoot for another week. And that was mind-numbing. And by the time we got to the last one, there was about a quarter of the crew was left, but we got through it. It was just, I would never want to make a film that way again, but at the same time, I'm extremely proud that we were able to pull through it.
Oh yeah, one of those great experiences to look back on and be able to have survived it and talk about. It's like, oh, I remember. I understand.
The bonds that were made are very strong.
Excellent. I guess speaking of movement and funding, I love the website for it. It's very Spartan. And the thing that caught my eye immediately before I volunteered to check this out, in unfortunately only 2 dimensions. Not many people opt for 3D. Why did you opt for 3D? And what challenges did that add to, I imagine, your already big plate of difficulties?
So I guess the 3D was kind of it was a finding process, because we had decided this was the film we were going to make, Leda, and I had decided that I was going to quit my job and figure out how to make it, because I had met a guy that needed someone to run his rental house, and I was like, I'll run the rental house if you let me use your gear to make the movie. So you start to find these little ways to actually maybe be able to focus all your time on making the project. And once I got to that point, I realized he had several matching camera sets, which is kind of the first necessary thing you need to make a 3D movie. Um, and I don't know if it was just me partially being an asshole and being like, we're gonna just make an independent 3D movie that's like really well done, or if
No words.
with no words. Yeah. So I mean, part of it was just, it's like we take one thing out, we take out the dialogue, and let's just see if we can add dimension and use that as a storytelling technique. Because that's the other thing. I am intrigued with the illusion of 3D depth on screen beyond just like focus and lighting and stuff, but like the actual 3D depth. I've been intrigued with it since I was like 9 and at the eye doctor and had to pinch a fly's wing or something with 3D glasses on. And so I've always felt like 3D's it's kind of gotten a bad rap and been dismissed as an amusement park addition to films rather than a potentially storytelling technique. And so the goal was, well, this is a progressive story of a woman kind of losing touch with reality, and how can we maybe use 3D to increase the depth so she's visually, like, subliminally farther from the other characters and farther from her settings as she's losing touch with them. It just seemed kind of like a natural addition to it. And then it was extremely unnatural because I didn't know what the hell I was doing trying to make a 3D movie. And I tried to, we tried to find an affordable 3D rig, which basically you have to have one camera for your right eye, one for your left eye, shooting through a half mirror rig, like a beam splitter rig. And those are like 60 grand to, buy or rent. And so I bought like a $5,000 one, and it was complete shit. It kept like losing alignment. So we ended up having a friend of the guy that owned the cameras, had a CNC machine and constructed a beam splitter rig for us. The whole thing ended up weighing 70 pounds with 2 RED cameras on it. And I had somehow, I forget how, but I had made a contact to Vince Toto, who had done the stereo for Dread 3D. And I couldn't afford to have him on the set, but he was our consultant. I would send him ideas and images, and he'd be like, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I read like 3 textbooks, and that's how we started. And then I just asked my DP to try to figure out how to move this 70-pound rig as much as you can. But it also lent itself to the style of the film because 3D works better with longer, slower shots. So you can scan the frame. And so that was part of the adventure. It was very difficult. He wanted to move a lot more, and had to basically build rigs that were swings and stuff for the finale scene. It was quite an endeavor. And then also post, of course, you have 2 films that are like the same film, and you have to sync them all and color correct them to match. And it was an absolute mess, but I'm kind of a complete nerd when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I was able to.
So you'd have to be. So
yeah,
kudos for that.
I think now we know why a lot of people, low budget filmmakers, don't shoot in 3D.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had to completely learn how to use the DaVinci Suite and spend several days just sitting at my colorist's desk to do all the 3D stuff, because he had no idea like how to align the 3D. So I'm like, all right, let me just take over. It was a little bit maddening, but yeah.
Well, it certainly the 2D variant I saw, I definitely could get hints of a number of cases where the third dimension could be very nicely explored. One of them, the really glorious shot. It's a nighttime shot. The moon takes up like a third of the screen, and Leda, the heroine, is riding from left to right on, I don't know if it's a horse or some sort of 4-legged, noble animal beast. And it's just this kind of thing that, it's a postcard that I want to like, stretch back a yard so I can, watch how that's all, interacting with itself. So I could see that's okay, this is it. Okay. Because I've seen some 3D, and yeah, generally I've said, oh yes, it is gimmicky and has the added difficulty in that a lot of places that screen it don't illuminate it sufficiently. So you have,
most definitely.
Yeah, the post-production errors of like, okay, they're not actually translating what was done with it. But with Leda here, I was like, okay, wow, I have never before regretted not having a 3D
Oh,
disc and television rig, because there's that, and a few other things, including, and I love my favorite, I guess there are a few elements. I mean, you obviously didn't make a comedy. This is a mythological melodrama kind of story here, as befits the source. But there was just this something that made me chuckle out loud, and I hope appropriately. Toward the end, near the final encounter, there is a quintessential horror film pan that you see Leda. She's starts the film not doing too well, and by now she's even worse, and I believe she's clutching a dagger, and she's standing in the foreground around a corner, and it pans just quick to the left, and you see the menacing thing resting at the corner of the stairs, and it's an egg. And it's the contrast between her expression, that is, shall we say, on the realistic side of 1920s horror expressionism with this blade, and then you see this thing that is, we've seen this thing on and off throughout the movie, but it's like, oh, she's terrified. What's she terrified of? Oh my God, it's an egg. And it's just that shot was just a really delightful, and for me, actually nicely broke the building tension that had been going on for the preceding 20 minutes, and then continues for, I think, up until just about the end of the movie at that point. So that, I imagine, in 3D would probably have been even shall we say, even more, so to speak, than it already was as I saw it there. But again, do forgive me if I misread into your intention there, but it just really felt.
I mean, yeah, as serious as the film seems, I mean, I don't take myself seriously at all. I'm talking to you from France, where I'm currently attending a clown school. So,
oh, how's that going, by the way?
It's been good. It's a program that's called Via Negativa. So you learn through failure. So you're meant to be shitty all the time, and yeah, I've had a lot of shitty days.
Oh, good. Glad to hear. So yeah, that's I think that covers quite a bit of what I was kind of curious about. I won't be closing up quite yet, because there's one thing I did want to mention to tip you off. I don't know if you've read my review, but there was a contemporary short film that very much came to mind, which was also dialogue free. A filmmaker by the name of Thomas Stark had a short called A Tale Best Forgotten, which is about 2.5, 3 minutes long, and is a sort of, looks like it's all one take of almost a spiraling film camera of this old farmhouse by a stream, and a horror story just unraveling within the various rotations of the camera, with up in a window, down on the ground, reflected in the water, and then spiraling back around in a manner that must have been a lot of challenging fun for the cinematographer. But I was very much reminded of this kind of extreme abstractness put to truly functional storytelling, which is something I don't see very much, because the abstract crowd, from what I've observed, may be going more for an emotion or a vibe, and the storytelling crowd very much telling a story and getting the two together. I've seen you do it, I've seen Thomas Stark do it, and obviously Meshes of the Afternoon is one of the big things to bring up here, and that also telling a story through its abstract means, which was unheard of then, and certainly largely unheard of since. So I just wanted to bring that shorter contemporary title to your.
Yes, and is it available to view online? Because
I have looked it, and I found it briefly, and I will look again, because I had to go 5 pages into a web search to a MailChimp archive.
Sure, yeah, because I think when I read your review, I looked it up and couldn't find it.
Yeah, I had a link, and I think it's gone dead now. So it exists. I've seen it. I know people who have seen it, and it just kills me. I was like, I cannot find it anywhere. It was I think it was at Slam Dance, amongst one of their shorts collections a couple years ago. So I will continue to look for it, because it was really I haven't really seen anything much like it. So, but that's a guy I hope continues.
Find it. Share it along.
a hint on that, Giles. If you say it was on Slamdance, they may have it on there. They have their own sort of pay
Okay.
site, so they may have it there behind a paywall.
Okay.
Quite possible.
All right. Well, that's some hope then. I don't mind paying for it, but yeah, so.
But yeah, the film has gotten like several reviews have given it comparisons to Maya Deren and such. And I'm not sure if that's, I don't know if that's an intentional thing. Obviously, this is my first feature, but it does reflect some of the styles of some of my short work. And it's interesting because I'm trying to work on the next script now and to see where that's going to evolve to. So I'd like to push more in that direction, but yeah, it's a growing, a blooming voice, I guess.
Well, I guess that is sort of a segue into sort of a winding down, which is something we always want to do, is ask you what's up next. So it sounds like you might not have it fully sketched out yet.
I have two scripts that they're both around the 50-page mark currently, and they're fully outlined out. Basically, I'm hoping to find some potential representation, and in the meantime, I'm going to try and dive into the next script later this year. As far as actually shooting it, my plan is to. Leda took us 10 years, and not over. It was a 6-figure budget, and that's why it took 10 years. And so my goal is to try to make and finish one in the next year that will be much smaller and probably more intimate, and hopefully in that sense more direct from mind to screen. So I think it's going to be much more autobiographical and simple, but still very abstract. It's not going to be a period piece in 3D, black and white, that's for sure. But in the meantime, I'm also writing a big abstract, leaning towards genre sci-fi piece or something once I do my more of a budget. So
sounds like that sounds like a good procedure to have two projects in the can, one that's very ambitious and one that's very doable, and then you can go with whichever one. If you have the means to go for the ambitious one, go for it. If not, you have the other one sitting there. But I wanted to ask, how does clown school fit into the filmmaking career?
well, after I finished Leda, I definitely kind of had several major burnouts because that process was horribly difficult. But I realized that the technical elements of filmmaking I was very familiar with, and that was kind of the easier part. But working with the actors I felt like my weakness. It was harder to know what that process was and how to find different things. Fortunately, the actors were talented enough to help me get there with them. But so in 2019, I found this theater school in France that is focused on clown, but I went to some of the actual acting classes for it. And then I wanted to come back for the theater school or for the clown portion of it, because I'm trying to potentially find my own character to work into some films. There's eventually I've got to dig into comedy a little bit to reach more of a massive audience and be able to tell deep moving stories, but reach everyone, kind of like Chaplin or Bean
or Mr. Hulot, since you're in France.
Most definitely.
I was wondering, because I believe Hodorowski went to clown school for a while, among many things.
Oh, did he? Wouldn't be
Perhaps it was mime. But there's been a long sort of connection, especially in France, I guess, between surrealists and clowns. So that's
most definitely
a natural progression.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's and beyond that, the whole learning to fail and such, it's kind of the perfect point for me right now, because I'm in that sophomore film fear, just terrified of making some garbage, especially after making a film that I'm proud of. So So at this point, it's going to be a forced effort and diving into the next one. But now I'm used to forcing the effort constantly.
Excellent. Giles, do you have any other questions, or do you want to?
I think that very well covers the background, the future, the film itself. Again, my review, I think, indicates that I highly recommend the experience, and it's visually stunning. And I'm not using that because I don't have anything else good to say about it, but it does stand out as very purposefully made and very adeptly made. And now we've heard quite a bit as to why that is the case, considering 10 years and I imagine 18 to 20-hour days for many of those 10 years and all the surroundings. So it's definitely a beautiful piece of storytelling craftsmanship that I do recommend. And speaking of recommendations, I was wondering if I could ask you, Samuel, what's your hometown? And do you have a restaurant there you can recommend?
My hometown is Frederick, Maryland. I don't live there any longer, but a restaurant, Cafe Bueno's got a pretty damn good burrito if you're into that sort of thing.
Many of us are.
Is it, are you out kind of in a rural area, or is it the suburb of the Baltimore area?
So it's about 45 minutes west of Baltimore, 45 minutes north of DC. I was actually raised on a dairy farm. My father's still a dairy farmer. But Frederick itself is the second biggest city in Maryland. Not that that's saying much, but it's a small, cute city.
Cool. And thank you for the recommendation. As for Leda, I know that you can get it on Blu-ray, and I believe that comes in either, or the 3D and 2D versions come together, so you don't have to worry about that, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's one disc with all of them on it. Yep.
You can also find it on video on demand on Amazon. Any other way people can get it that we should know about?
Yes, you can stream it in 3D on Vudu. You can also stream it in 2D on Vudu. You can stream it on Canopy if you have the library card, or on Hoopla. Also on the Google Play Store, on iTunes. I'm sure I'm missing something, but yeah, it's out there in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And then also on DVD too, if you want DVD. And we're making exclusive 4:3 anaglyph mono audio VHSs for real collectors.
Oh, sweet nostalgia. Well, I certainly don't blame you.
I thought I was done it, and I wanted to be done the whole project. And then, like last month, I found myself spending several hours making a 4:3 pan scan cut of every shot of the film. Like, I'm just addicted at this point.
Are you sending out the little glasses with the red and the blue lens in the
Yes,
VHS?
yeah, for the people who order the VHS, they'll get 2 pairs of anaglyph glasses.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Sounds good. I'm glad we did this long format so we didn't have to cut you short, because we did have a lot to go over on the reviews this week, and we got to we'll probably post these together and separately. So people who just are interested in the interview will be able to go to that, and people who are interested in the whole show can watch the whole show. But I think we will log off now. Thank you, Samuel Tressler IV, for being our guest. Thank you, Giles. Coming back next week, I will be co-hosting with L. Rob Hubbard. I finally convinced him to come on because he wants to interview our guest next week, who is John Michael McCarthy of Teenage Tupelo fame, which is a movie you probably haven't heard of, but those who have know what I'm talking about. It's a very, very strange movie, and we're excited to have him next week. So that said, goodbye, everyone. Thank you all for coming on. Thank you for listening, and we are out of here.